Morning. Wonder how much you get to watch me just walking around before it starts. Hello. So Thursday. You'll see I have a chair. I plan on using a chair today, so I'm just gonna have it there for when I need it. And it's a hard, more or less. Oh my gosh, it's dusty. This is a chair I haven't used for a while, obviously. Just gonna dust it. This is thrilling live stream so far, isn't it? So, welcome if you haven't joined before. This is a follow-along practice. Obviously, I can't see you. So yeah, it's an invitation for you to play around with and very much sort of learn about yourself, learn about your body, tune in your sensing as you follow along with the structure and the way that I'm guiding movement and guiding awareness, rather than just kind of looking at me and trying to copy me and do as I do. That's not going to be very helpful for you. So it might be helpful for you every now and again to look at what I'm doing if you don't understand what I'm talking about. But I talk a lot, I'm talking through all the time so that hopefully people can do without just watching the screen all the time. And then kind of check in with me when you need to, like what's going on. But I need to understand what I'm talking about, not to kind of look to me as if I'm doing it perfectly. That's just not the case. And I'm not trying to do anything perfectly. I'm trying to work with movements, patterns of movement, structures and uses of awareness in a way that you can't get it wrong, as long as you're just listening to what your own experience is. And your own experience is your guide. And above all, as I always say, because the sort of biggest frame for everything is one's own comfort. So for me, I will be just listening to my own comfort all the way through, and that will dictate what I want to do, if I want to push a bit further, if I want to bring it back, if I want to take a rest, and so on. And all of those things, they're up to you to work out as well. When do you want to push it further? When do you want to go slower? When do you want to change your tempo? When do you want to rest? When do you want to go off dancing or think, I've had enough, I'm going to go for a jog now because I really feel like it? Or when do you think, do you know what, I'm just going to have a nap? All of those things are completely fine. So, it's Mental Health Awareness Week. Everything I'm doing this week is a little bit more focused on the kind of, I'm just being a bit more explicit about how how movement and sensation and awareness all of these things are already a mental health practice, but I'm just being a bit more explicit about the connections, about what the different physiological phenomena do for, potentially for one's mental health. Gonna have a lie down. And yeah, just to finish the sentence I never finished earlier, the chair is quite solid, kind of like a kitchen chair or a dining chair or something. Or you could do the same thing with a stool maybe. I don't necessarily need the back of the chair, but it's important that it's not a bit kind of like an armchair or a sofa or like something padded where you, like something that sort of swallows you up and you lean back in it. So importantly, your bottom isn't kind of like sinking down, your back isn't sinking down and back. So I'll use the chair a bit later. I'm just going to start by lying down and noticing what I can sense. Oh, just this delicious breeze coming in through the window. I don't have a garden here, but our downstairs neighbours have a gorgeous back garden. And I'm just so grateful for their back garden because it just wafts up these smells of flowers, and you can hear the trees and the birds. So I just start very vague, very gentle, very soft, just noticing what comes to my attention. This is, I guess, the most sort of basic mindful practice. Just stopping for a moment and noticing. And like any mindful practice, one notices things drifting in and out of one's field of awareness. Of course, thoughts are always part of it, whether constantly or not, but at some point thoughts come drifting in and out, and I'm going to shift my attention a little bit more consciously to the body. I feel I'm sort of like quite out in my space. I'm aware of the air, the light, the sounds. Obviously I'm talking. So I'm just shifting my intention a little bit in to my own body, and how I sense, how I experience my own body. I feel I'd be comfier if I bent my knees and had my feet standing. So I've got an impression of how I lie with my legs long. But at the moment, it's comfier for my back if I bend my knees and stand my feet. So I'm just going to continue like that. And I'm going to scan from my feet, noticing how my feet are contacting the floor. If I kept my legs long, it would be my heel, and I would see which point of the back or side of the heel is making contact with the ground. As it is with my knees bent, I've got my feet standing. I'm not trying to lie in any correct way. I'm just lying in a way that's comfortable. And noticing the soles of the feet against the ground. I can't sense all that well, without a lot of pressure going through my feet, I can't sense all that well the contact with the ground, but I can feel just feel a bit more able to sense the sole of my left foot than the sole of my right foot. So that's the difference. I feel like maybe the sole of my left foot is a little better spread out, and the sole of my right foot has got less contact. Like I feel the big toe, the tip of the big toe really clearly. I feel the kind of pads of the ball of the foot quite clearly, and I feel like one point towards the back of the heel quite clearly. But I feel it's my foot is sort of like suctioned up, lifted away from the floor a bit more on the right hand side. I'm just scanning up through the legs, noticing whatever I can sense about the legs. I notice a different quality in the musculature on one leg compared to the other, in the calf. The knee, I want to notice where the knees are, where are they pointing. How close are my knees to my midline? Earlier this week I did a huge session just on the midline, and so I'm just sensing the line of the spine, how it goes down. I feel like actually today my left leg is closer to my midline. So if I think about the middle of my pubic bone, that's the bottom of the midline in my torso. That's actually going through my center, but at the front of the body it would be the pubic symphysis, the very middle of the pubic bone in the front of the pelvis. And if I visualize or feel where that is, I can feel that it's a little bit closer to my left inner thigh than my right inner thigh. I'm kind of demonstrating by touching myself, but actually you don't need to do that necessarily. But I can just visualize and feel my left leg is a little closer to my center than my right leg is. And actually while I'm here, I just feel the need to move my knees in and out a little bit, and already I can just sense that there's a lot more freedom in my right leg than there is in my left. So my left foot, my left leg feel kind of more solid, more stodgy, and my right foot feels a little kind of like thinner and more mobile. There's no kind of value judgment. There's no way of doing a value judgment. They're just different, because if you took a value judgment from the way I was talking about the feet, you might think the left is better, more spread out, and the right is not so good because it kind of feels tighter and smaller and pulled away from the floor. Then when I get up to the leg, it's like, well, the right one feels more mobile, the left one feels kind of thicker, and there's a bit more pulling in of the muscles in the calf. And so there's no good or bad side, or they're just different. Up to the pelvis, just noticing how my pelvis makes contact with the floor. I feel a a little bit more even than I have done previously this week, so that's kind of nice. And my belly's softening and I feel my breath settling. I definitely still feel a difference in my left and right sides of my pelvis, but not such a stark difference. Go up to my belly and my lower back, just taking in whatever I can. I'm going to close my eyes again. I always feel the left side of my belly is a little bit more expansive. Coming up to my ribs and chest, same thing. The left side of my ribs and my chest, a little bit more expansive. Right side is pulling in towards my center a little bit more. Better at drawing in, less good at expanding out. Left side, better at expanding out, less good at drawing in. Then I just notice my back, how my shoulders make contact with the floor. I feel a sort of bit of a tightness in the tissue, just a sort of surface layers of tissue and a bit of muscle. I just have a very tiny kind of wriggle inside my own skin, so I'm not sliding against the ground, but just doing tiny little wriggles and shifts through my chest so that I'm sliding my own ribs and shoulders inside my own flesh as my flesh sticks to, well, my t-shirt, which sticks to the floor. And that just provides a nice little bit of releasing up my neck, into my shoulders, up, all the way up into my scalp actually, and eyes. Just very slowly, softly, a small movement of wriggling, slightly pressing myself into the ground and wriggling, just because I want to release a little bit of the tissue around there. And then I rest again. Quite soft and open across the chest, but there's always room for improvement. But I feel my shoulders are opening up into the ground without too much difficulty today, accepting the support of the ground. And just lengthening my legs again, so lying with my legs long for a moment. And just through doing that scan, the use of my awareness, I did a tiny little bit of movement with my knees and hips, and I did a tiny little bit of movement with my chest and shoulders, my torso and shoulders. And just from those things, I feel it's easier for me to lie with my legs long, so my back is already settling a little bit. And I'm going to bend my knees and stand my feet again. And I'm going to begin to roll my pelvis a little up and down, just to see how it feels. And I'm really not interested in trying to do a sort of perfect movement, and I'm trying not to do it as if I mean, if you take Pilates class with me, then it's a whole other kettle of fish, but typically if you take a Pilates class with a typical Pilates teacher, they will really dictate how you do this movement according to certain Pilates methodology, and I'm trying to disregard that intentionally. I don't want to make sure that I'm evenly going both ways. I'm not particularly trying to engage my core or anything like that. I'm just exploring what is it like to roll my pelvis both ways, so up and down. Up and down. When I say up, what I'm doing is I'm tucking my tailbone underneath a little bit. I'm rolling the contact with the floor towards the top of the sacrum and the lower back, so my lower back can kind of come into contact with the floor a little bit better. And then when I go the other way, I come back from wherever I started, and I just see, can I stick the bottom out a little bit and start to slightly increase the arch under the lumbar spine. So the point of pressure is rolling down my tailbone towards my coccyx. And the pubic bone lengthens away from the belly button. I go both ways. I'm actually going to bring my fingertips to my belly and my pubic bone to make that even clearer. So I've got my right fingertips all together, but with my middle finger basically in my belly button. And I'm going to use my left fingertips to find just the kind of, it's called the pubic mound, like the top of the pubic bone. And I'm just, as I tuck my tailbone underneath, I can draw those things together a little bit. I feel that the distance between the pubic bone and the belly button gets shorter. And then as I roll my pelvis down, feel my belly button lifts up a little bit towards the ceiling, and my pubic bone pushes down, and the distance between my hands grows longer. And I'm just going to roll my pelvis up and down. Whatever rhythm feels helpful to me, changing rhythm every now and again so I don't get stuck in something habitual straight away. Letting my knees do whatever they want to do in order to be comfortable. I can sense a difference in my left and right sides as I'm doing that, but I know that probably 4 years ago, 5 years ago maybe, I definitely couldn't notice that difference. It was there, but I couldn't sense it. I really am aware of it these days from a lot of awareness work. And I just rest. I feel that my shoulders are resting even better on the ground, so that's a sort of little byproduct of what I've just been doing that I wasn't thinking about. But as I move the pelvis, I'm moving the whole spine, I'm moving the ribs, I'm moving the shoulders, all incidentally, just in order to facilitate the rolling of the pelvis. And I'm going to interlace my hands behind my head and have my elbows wide to start with. And then I just want to acknowledge out loud that this whole time I'm resting, I've been looking directly up at the ceiling, and that's interesting for me because sometimes I feel that I tend to look up or down. And so there's something going on with my alignment today where it's really easy for me just to look straight ahead at the horizon. So that's really nice for me. Interlacing my hands behind my head, and I'm going to let my elbows come up towards the ceiling to help me lift my head, and I just want to see what it feels like to lift my head. I'm just weighing my head, that's all I'm doing. I'm weighing my head. As I weigh my head, I'm just remembering always this kind of dual awareness, these multiple ways of being attentive. So I have the sort of specific focus on what's it like, what does my head weigh, what's it like to lift my head. I'm not trying to do it in any correct way, just seeing what's it like to lift my head. At the same time, I'm having this more expansive kind of soft focus awareness. In terms of vision, it would be like, instead of focusing on something sharply in front of you as if to read, it would be like a peripheral vision, so like the kind of vision where you can catch something out of the corner of your eye. And I have that kind of attention, that kind of awareness drifting around my body so that I can catch things out of the corner of my eye, out of the corner of my sort of conscious eye, eye of consciousness, gosh, I don't know what I'm saying, so that I can just feel other things, like I can feel the contact with my ground changing, I can feel still that little bit of tension in my left calf that I could feel earlier. I can feel the contact of the back of the pelvis with the floor is a little bit clearer to me, that it's a little bit more on one side than the other. When I lift my head, that becomes more apparent. I just can keep checking with my own comfort, like, oh yeah, I can soften my chest more, oh wow, and then suddenly it's easier to lift my head already. So that I wasn't even trying to change my technique, but I just realised I could soften my chest, and then it's easier for me to lift my head. And so on, just letting my attention drift around. I'm going to rest again, lying my arms down, lying my legs down, resting. So just want to say a little disclaimer to anybody, or a tip combined with a disclaimer. I'm going to be moving through from now on. I'm going to be, as far as, unless I bump into something unexpected on my way, in my experience, my intention is to move faster through multiple variations of things that I'm very, very used to, and I've done a lot in Feldenkrais classes, and they look very, very simple. But the dangerous thing about doing something with video rather than just audio, and also following along with somebody else's practice, is this component of feeling like, as a student, you have to follow along what the teacher is saying. And actually, in this instance, this is me doing my own practice, and I want to explore a lot of variations of something which maybe actually I could, if I was teaching a workshop, they're so rich, there's so much in here that I could do this for an intensive weekend, or like a whole series, like a week of classes every day, or one class a week for a term or something. So I'm really going to pack a lot in. And what that means is I just want to just re-invite, like particularly remind people that you don't have to do everything that I'm doing. So you could just do a third of what I'm doing if you're really checking in with when you want to rest, what feels good, what doesn't. It's about noticing how you're doing what you're doing. That's more important than what you're actually doing, is the practice of noticing how you're doing what you're doing it softly, doing it in a way that's pleasurable, no pressure, and then it gets smoother and smoother. And the reason I say that is because this whole thing is about integrating more of one's self. So I'm just going to come to standing, and I'm just going to feel what it's like to stand. It's already different, I know, because I've already done some work on the floor. I'm just going to see what it feels like to look down and look up. A very simple test, taking into my field of awareness anything I can notice while I'm doing it, including how dusty the lampshade is. Maybe it's the light, it means I'm seeing the dust today, a certain quality of light. So I notice what I can do comfortably. I don't need to push beyond that. I notice what I can feel in the soles of the feet. I pause. I go again. Is this a movement just of my neck? Is it a movement of my neck and chest? Is it a movement of my whole spine? Is my pelvis moving? How is my pelvis moving? And I want to try looking at different places, so I go from looking sort of far away, as if following a line far away down from somewhere deep in the ground, out to the horizon, up to the sky. Let's do that a couple of times. Gosh, I feel very heavy in my feet today. It's the heat. And then I pause. And then I'm going to do a different version of like something up close. So just looking up to the ceiling, and then down to my chest. Or like I want to see just below my breasts. I want to see the bottom of my breastbone. So I'm kind of looking in a tighter circle, and I feel what that does. Like I could even try and see different parts of my breastbone. And notice how different parts of me participate in that case. And that's enough. And doesn't try and copy me, but just look up and down. So I'm going to talk through what I'm doing, what the instructions are of what I'm doing. And I'll add bits of what I notice, but not to say that it has to be done that way. So when I look up and down, I can already feel my pelvis rolling. I can feel my back rounding and arching. I'm just going to pause. Sitting bones, the bony part of the base of the pelvis. So instead of looking up and down, I'm just going to roll my pelvis. I'm going to stick my bottom out a little bit and then tuck my tailbone underneath a little bit. So this is kind of what I was doing on the floor, except I don't have the floor behind me anymore like I did when I was lying down. I feel my breath settles again. Gosh, I feel it really is a release to roll back, like to slump a little bit. I find some softening there. So then if that's the way that I'm comfy going, how do I go the other way? I need to go really slowly and explore something comfortable, and I notice that I'm taking some weight of my torso in my hands. So I'm actually leaning forwards to stick my bottom out. So this is me just rolling my forehead backwards and forwards. I'm so self-conscious of the disclaimer. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. Do it your own way. What's it like for you to roll your pelvis forwards and backwards? So I'm just trying to notice how I do what I do. The instruction is rolling the pelvis forwards and backwards so that I can feel I'm rolling behind the sitting bones and then I'm rolling in front of the sitting bones. And I want to make it as smooth as possible. So I can like reverse it, I can change the size, I can just go forwards and backwards in a little part where it's not so clear for me. Just going forwards and backwards, rolling over my sitting bones. I'm not thinking about, I'm not dictating anything about what the rest of the body should do. I'm just letting the whole of the body do whatever it wants to do in order to make the rolling forwards and backwards over the sitting bones as comfortable, as easy and pleasurable as possible. And I'm just going to actually lean back in my chair to rest. If anybody doesn't have a chair back, you can lean forwards on your elbows and rest on your elbows. This position, I feel like my dad. Falling asleep in the evening. And I come back, and I just come back to rolling the pelvis forwards and backwards. And I want to point out for myself that, well, first of all, I want to ask, well, what's my head doing? So again, I haven't dictated what the head should do. I've just focused on rolling the pelvis in whatever way is comfortable. And making myself comfortable on the chair. I'm shifting my weight a bit because now that I'm settling into the chair a bit more, I feel I need to kind of spread myself out a bit better on the chair. And I notice that my head is moving a lot. It's moving forwards and backwards in space. Less now actually than it was before. But depending on how I roll the pelvis, my head does different things. So I'm going to just break down those things and try all of the variations. And to start with, actually, what I'm going to say is, what if I let the head be involved? Again, there are so many different ways of doing this. For somebody unfamiliar, it might be a surprise. All of the different variations of what the head could be doing. So again, there's no need to necessarily look to me for an example. I'm just doing... At the moment, I found one variation out of many. It feels good, and I'm actually doing quite a big movement. So again, it's really possible to just do, maybe I'll just try a few smaller, really, really small, and notice what my head does if I just move fractionally forwards and backwards. So when I just move fractionally forwards and backwards, rolling my weight just a little bit in front and behind the sitting bones. Well, first of all, actually I find it harder to breathe, harder to relax. Oh, so I'm just kind of constantly having to go look, oh, relax, oh, relax, oh. I'm just going to rest, leaning forwards on my elbows. Actually, one, two, nice. So for me, I've got really bony sitting bones. I've got big ass, but bony sitting bones. So it can get uncomfortable. If I was on just a wooden stool, I would already feel aggravated and painful in my sitting bones. So it's really important that if you have that, there's a lot of muscular connections to the sitting bones, and you don't want to be like aggravating that area. So although I said no soft chair that you sink into, you want a kind of solid base on the chair so you can feel the sitting bones, but don't kind of grind away at the sitting bones on something really hard and uncomfortable. It's different for everybody, but I'm just flagging that up in case anybody wants to like sit on a towel or something. Just come back to sitting upright. Rolling my pelvis forwards and backwards again. I'm going to keep it tiny so that I can notice a little bit more what's happening in the rest of my body. I can feel that I can soften my jaw a bit more, soften my chest a bit more. A different thing happens in terms of the coordination of the pelvis and the head in this instance for me. And I'll just pause for a moment, just resting where I am. And I'm going to start to round my back and arch. I'm going to round my back and arch. And as I round my back and arch my back, I will tuck my tailbone underneath and look down towards my pubic bone. And then I arch my back, that means my bottom sticks out, and I look up, my chin lifts away from my chest. So when I look down and roll behind my sitting bones, tucking my tailbone underneath, the front of my body gets shorter and the back of my body gets longer. When I roll my pelvis the other way, I stick my bottom out, my belly goes out, my chest opens up. And I look up and the front of my body gets longer and the back of my body gets shorter. So I'm just going to work on this a little bit. Super slow pace, because especially for me, because I'm going through a really big range of movement, so could do a fraction of the movement. Interesting for me just to notice that I was going really big. What's it like to go really small? Same phenomena, opening the front of the body, closing the back of the body, closing the front of the body, opening the back of the body, letting the head look up and down as the pelvis rolls. And now, regardless of the size of the movement, I'm going to just play with that as I feel. But I just want to notice my whole spine. Somebody sent me a question the other day. How do I feel my spine? How do I sense my spine? Well, we can sense things in movement. Actually, I had thought it would be nice, I just forgot, to be honest. I thought it would be nice to bring a picture of the spine to this session and just look at that a little bit at the beginning, but I forgot. But it's a nice thing to do so that you can have a little bit of a sense of what it is that you're feeling bearing in mind that everybody's spine is a little bit different in terms of alignment, in terms of the size and distance between the size of the vertebra, the distance between the vertebrae, etc. But everybody's got the basic same component parts of the spine. And it's nice to look at a picture. And what I'm doing now is I round my back and look down with my tailbone tucked under, and arch my back and look up, with my pubic bone pushing down and my bottom sticking out. I'm trying to sense the whole curve, the whole line of the spine. I'm trying to expand my awareness to include more of me. Just did a little cheeky extra variation there that I didn't bother talking about. But basically just following what feels nice and then returning to the same thing. Playing with the component parts of the spine. Can I get the whole spine involved proportionally? Doesn't mean that everything moves the same amount. It means everything moves from each according to, I can't remember the exact wording of the original quote, but basically Larry Goldfarb, Feldenkrais teacher, calls it sensory motor Marxism. Differentiating and integrating all of the parts of the self. In this instance I'm talking about the spine, the vertebra. The idea of sensory motor Marxism is from each according to its ability, to each according to its need. Something like that. I'm just going to pause and rest. So can I use the whole of my spine, the whole length, and can I be aware of the bits that are overworking, doing too much? Can I be aware of the bits that are underworking, not doing enough? It might be a case that some bits are lazy and they don't want to contribute. Or it might be a case that those bits want to contribute but other bits are doing too much work and they can't give up doing that work, and so the bits that want to get involved can't get involved because they can't get any work. Somebody else is just doing too much. Little relationships between the vertebrae. Everybody has these not quite ideal Marxist systems functioning in the spine, in the whole system, in the whole body. So I come back to rolling the pelvis without thinking about the back. Oh, and I feel a freedom in rolling the pelvis. And I notice, what's my head doing? Well, my head is doing a little bit what it was doing before, but I notice it's dropping when I round, but when I arch it's just looking straight ahead. So I'm not, when I don't think about it, I didn't want to just lift my head up to the ceiling, it didn't feel relevant. I'm arching my back and just looking forwards, but when I round my back I look down. I'm going to intentionally do a different variation now. So I am going to round my back and look up. That means I'm tucking my tailbone underneath, rolling the weight behind my sitting bones and looking up. I stay there for a moment. I'm not still when I'm there, I'm just absorbing information and sinking a little bit deeper into it, still within my range of comfort. This is a really nice slouch, basically. My weight is rolled behind my sitting bones and I'm looking up. And then I roll my weight in front of my sitting bones so my pubic bone pushes away from my belly button and my back starts to arch, and I look down with my head, with my eyes. It's a very, very different organisation. In fact, it's basically the opposite organisation of the head and spine. Rounding the back and looking up. Arching the back and looking down. So even though it's a completely different organisation of the movement and of the component parts of the movement, I'm still trying to stay with it in such a way that I can notice what's working, what's not, what's contributing and what's not, what's over-efforting, which parts of myself am I not aware of. I'm trying, as I do that, to coordinate the movement so that diaphragm work. I can feel my pelvic floor changing, my respiratory diaphragm changing as I yawn. Just resting for a moment. And I'll just do that variation a few more times, and this is one of these variations particularly that somebody watching, you might just want to skip it because it's a variation outside of the pattern, the theme that I'm doing for the rest of the session. An alternative option, but trying this alternative option can just free up something different. Make you discover something different. So I come back to it. Sticking the belly out and arching the back, sticking the bottom out, my weight rolls in front of my pubic bones as I look down. And tucking my tailbone underneath as I look up. And as I look down and I see my belly and chest sticking out, I see it in my peripheral vision. I'm soft focused with the eyes. I'm not really seeing anything. I just got kind of spaced out eyes. My jaw can be soft and my eyes can be soft. And I'm seeing how can I slowly become more aware of more of my spine, more of my torso, maybe more of myself. That includes the shoulder blades sliding against the ribs at the back of the body, the collarbones widening and compacting together in the front of the chest. And as I try to proportionally distribute the effort, I also try to coordinate it so it's not that my pelvis is doing one thing and my head is doing another thing, but my pelvis moves and my head is just part of that movement. That means that it happens at the same time. There are, again, as I said, infinite variations of this, because I could initiate with the pelvis and let that ripple up through my spine and finish at my head. I could initiate with the pelvis and delay through the spine and finish at the head. Or I could start at the head and let that move through the spine and finish at the pelvis. So I'm just getting complicated now. Starting at the head, rippling through the spine and finishing at the pelvis. So there are all those variations, but actually what I'm going to try and do now is just proportionally distribute effort and timing so that my head and pelvis and everything in between moves at exactly the same time, beginning the movement at the same time, and arriving at the destination at the same time. Changing direction to begin again at the same time and arriving at the other destination at the same time. And as I try to do that, of course, I might notice that that's not actually the case. I might notice that my pelvis likes to lead or my head likes to lead. I might notice that in one direction one bit leads and in the other direction the other bit leads. For me today, I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job of coordinating initiation and timing. They start together, they flow together, they arrive together. That's enough of that. I'm going to take a rest leaning forwards. And I'm going to lean back. It's comfier to be really off my sitting bones when I sit back. I'm really like slouched behind my sitting bones. And I'm really not sitting in any way that could be called correct, so it means I get to chill out and not think about anything a bit. I can hear my neighbour gardening outside. So bending my knees again so that my feet are more or less underneath my knees, coming back up to sitting. Just want to see how I feel, see what I notice. I'll close my eyes a bit just to sense Interestingly for me, I feel more even right to left than I did before. And I'm going to just lean forwards, the last variation in sitting. Lean right forwards on my chair, so I'm starting already way in front of my sitting bones. I've got weight on the top of my thighs. I'm sat towards the edge of the chair still, so that my knees are kind of free. There's quite a gap between my knee and the chair, but I've got good support at the top of the thighs, kind of meaty bit at the top of the thighs. And I just lean my elbows, and my elbows and forearms towards the front of the thigh and over the knee. My arms can hang, and I just roll the pelvis here a little bit. So here I feel I've got more, well, I just want to notice, basically. I want to notice what I'm doing. It's a really different position. I felt the need to shuffle a bit more towards the edge of my chair to get some freedom to stick my bottom out. Alright. So I feel there's an effort when I want to tuck my tailbone underneath and around my back. I can feel that I'm really using my feet against the floor in a way that I wasn't before. And I'm also tucking my tummy in a little bit more actively. So the weight is kind of like coming off my elbows a little bit. Because I'm trying to roll the weight behind my sitting bones whilst keeping my elbows attached to my thighs or my knees. So I've intentionally placed a restriction on the movement by keeping my elbows on my knees. Now I want to see what happens. And I'm not going to talk through what variations I'm doing, but I am going to play with what my head is doing. Rolling the pelvis, only doing what's easy. And really, where my head is and what my head is doing affects massively what's happening with my shoulders against my back, with my belly move pulling in, with the rounding of the back. I just need to rest because it's getting a bit aggravating for my hamstrings. The pressure of the chair against old scar tissue I have, unfortunately. And I just do one last bit of play with that, leaning forwards again. I wasn't finished playing with what my head is doing. Then what does the head do? And again, like, you could just do less. You could just do smaller, do slower, just take a rest, chill out, whatever. Oof. Done. Just stand up, see how I feel. Wow. Different. I don't know. I can't say why. Suddenly aware that I've got massive tight muscles down my thighs from yesterday or the day before from training. Ooh, it's tight. And I'm probably more aware of that because I feel the rest of myself is able to open up a bit, align a bit. I'm still quite aware of the difference between my left and right side. I'm just going to bring my feet together so that I can distribute my weight better between both feet. So a narrower base of support with my feet together. Something else I've been talking about in workshops this week is how human beings are not stable. We're not designed to be stable. We've got this tiny base of support. So finding a connection from the sitting bones to the feet, so we've been working on the sitting bones, that can be really grounding. It can help the feet spread out and get a better base of support. But if we really want to be stable, we just take our feet apart. That's how we get stable. Or we take our feet, anybody with a kind of physical practice will know that kind of grounding stability. Whereas normally with our feet narrower, we wiggle around in gravity, we wave around a lot, and we're kind of just always off balance. It's like a falling and catching balance, and falling and catching balance, and this is just our relationship to gravity. Balancing, 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 balancing. There's been amazing brain work with people who just completely lost balance from the vestibular system and retraining the brain. I'm not going to go into it right now. So balancing, accepting instability, finding stability in instability. Connecting the sitting bones to the feet to allow the breath to be soft, to allow proportional distribution of movement. And it's the proportional distribution of movement that will stop us from gripping the shoulders up to the ears, or pulling the belly in out of tension or anxiety or whatever. Just going to get rid of the chair and do a whole bunch of final variations on the floor again. Actually having a sip of water. So if somebody's feeling really good after that, maybe you just want to chill out, maybe you're finished. But I'm just going to do a little bit more kind of mobilising in loads of different positions just to finish. I come back to lying down. I just want to check in with how I'm making contact with the ground. I'm about to go through about 20 different Feldenkrais classes in 5 minutes, which is absolutely anti the method, totally counter to what Feldenkrais is about. But I'm stealing bits I like and doing what I want with them. Leaning back on my hands, feet in front of me somewhere comfortable, fingers facing forwards, rolling the pelvis. In a matter of seconds, how can I stay calm and allow myself to notice and soften and accept that I can only do what's comfortable, that I'm not going to achieve something great in the space of a few seconds. But how can I soften into it and allow gradually my pelvis to roll both ways? And as always, the more of myself I can get involved, whether the getting involved is active, a doing, or whether the getting involved is a stopping doing, a releasing, a letting go in order to permit movement. How can I involve more of myself in this pattern of action to better distribute the effort, proportional distribution of the movement, to include more of myself. And of course I'm thinking about more of my spine, but I'm also thinking about what my hips are doing, what my head is doing, variations on where my legs are, where my knees are, how my belly is moving, how my eyes are getting involved, what my jaw is doing, what my shoulders and chest are doing. I find some nice opening in my chest. I'm going to bring my feet together and continue. Juicy, juicy. Belly out. This doesn't look like any normal fitness video, does it? Pushing my belly out like a toddler. And then belly in. Allowing my legs to be where I want them. I'm doing a soles of the feet together variation. And my soles of the feet are pressing against each other so that my knees are also moving, so that I can let my legs contribute to the movement. And my head, I don't know what my head is doing, but I'm trying different variations. Coming down to rest for a second. I told myself I would do more, but I feel so good lying here right now. Oh my god, what a dilemma. I'm gonna keep going just for a second. Rolling the pelvis. This time I'm leaning on my elbows. Well, I really only want to do something tiny here. And it's an intentional restriction. My elbows on the ground means, how can the rest of my body be involved in this position? So depending on orientation in space, relationship to gravity, depending on the organization of the body in space, proportional distribution is different. In different circumstances, different parts work more or less. Different bits give up work, different bits get involved actively or stop working in order to allow other bits to move. Had enough of that one. Taking my knees over my belly, rolling my pelvis up and down now just by taking my knees towards my chest and away from my chest. The simplest version, so that my legs, so my pelvis can actually be passive, my hips are passive. And then coming up onto all fours. Same thing. Rolling my pelvis. Imagine my sitting bones. So again, this is a position where in other classes I might dictate a certain way of doing it, but right now I want to sense my sitting bones. So I just do whatever I can in order to sense my sitting bones. Where is my bum? Clearer. I turn the other way. I've got my bum in the spotlight. So I'm just rolling my pelvis. In this case, it's up and down. It's the equivalent when I was lying on my back. It's the equivalent of rolling my pelvis up and down. When I was sitting on a chair, it's the equivalent of rolling the pelvis forwards and backwards. So tailbone tucks under. Pubic bone pushes away from belly button as the bottom sticks out. Tailbone tucks under. Pubic bone pushes away from the belly button as the bottom sticks out. What is the rest of me doing? How can more of me get involved? I can feel my shoulders getting involved. That's lovely. I can feel my head getting involved. And I don't want to do any other variations with the head right now. I've had enough of the complications. But I am varying timing a little bit. And then I'm coming down onto my forearms, elbows now just immediately beneath my shoulders, and I'm still trying to just move my sitting bones. And I let my head do what I want. Let my head do what it wants. Here I feel like I can do a bit more variation on what the head is doing. A bit flowy. Changing sequence, timing, coordination. Found a variation which makes it much more abdominal work. And then lying back. Sitting back, just to finish by coming up to standing and seeing how I feel. And have my feet together again. Closing my eyes, experiencing myself in space. Feeling my sitting bones, even though they're now buried deep in the flesh of my pelvis, they're not in contact with the chair, that makes it easier to feel them. But there is some connection of force from my feet, my heels, my sitting bones, up to my head, and I can feel myself waving softly in relation to gravity without any effort. That's nice. And I take a walk. And I say thank you while I'm walking. Thanks for joining. I'm gonna be off next week. No practice next week. But for anybody who watches live stream via my website, you can go to the YouTube channel directly, and you can catch up on past practices. So there's, I don't know how many weeks now of practices to catch up on. There's plenty of stuff. And yeah, I think it was maybe the Friday of the first week that there's a bunch of this stuff which is treated just as a Feldenkrais lesson. And then again on my website there's a mini version which is a Feldenkrais lesson of like 8 minutes or something, just with, it's basically an audio lesson but